Welcome to Scaling the Well, the podcast to elevate your view.
Hello, this is Brian P., and welcome to Scaling the Well. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at Scaling the Well Podcast. Definitely check out my website, scalingthewell.com. And I'm Scaling the Well on Facebook, too, if you guys still use Facebook. I know a lot of people don't anymore. So today's a special day because this is my first guest, the first guest on Scaling the Well. It's somebody I consider my brother, Eazy Ocegueda. And he is somebody I've known since probably, I think around 2008. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. So the way we met, and I think I've talked about this before in some of my other podcasts about dating and the relationships between men and women. Like if you are a man out there and I think I had this saying before that I came up with because I think it encapsulates this concept really good. Like a true king only needs one woman, but many sisters. And so I have a lot of like really good friends who are female who are, I consider sisters. You know, they're there for me. You know, if I ever had any problems, you know, I could, if I can't go to my guy friends, I could cry to them, you know, if I had something, you know, and these things are things that I think that a lot of men take for granted. You know, they think, you know, we only need ourselves and we isolate ourselves. And one of the main things I got from being a social worker is that support systems are everything. You know, you can't carry the world on your shoulders, you know, even though sometimes you feel like you have to. And so his wife, Vianney, worked, you know, in CWS with me. And she was amazing, you know, and when I came to that particular office, we were, you know, she would show me the ropes, you know, and all these things, because a lot of people come in with the kind of arrogance and stuff. But she was as opening and welcome. And she had like a little group of people, you know, that she was friends with, and I got in good with them. And then eventually she introduced me to her husband. And I mean, we hit it off right away. I mean, I know that a lot of people always talk about, you know, people who they look up to and people who inspired them. This guy inspired me. You know, he has an incredible life story, and we're gonna get into that today. So, Eazy, it goes by Eazy. Where are you from?
Well, I'm from San Diego, but I was raised in TJ in Mexico.
Okay. So when you were in TJ, like how old were you when you came over? Was it back and forth, or how did that work?
Well, it was both. You know, in the weekends I would go down there, and then during the week I would stay here. My parents had a little trailer, and I would stay there. And yeah, that's basically where I'm at.
Okay. So, like, how was growing up in South San Diego, TJ? Like, what was that like? That was back in the 80s? Like,
yes,
80s?
back in the 80s,
back in the day.
Yes, back in the day. Well, it was kind of one of the things that you mentioned that actually just got to me right now, and it's very important, is the support system, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, growing up, I didn't have that. I didn't have that support system for my parents or for my brothers. Yeah, you could talk to them, and you know they were there, but literally they were not there. You know, and so like I had to be able to manage myself with other people around me that lived around me. You know, in order for me to, you know, sometimes, you know, my parents would leave milk, cereal and stuff like that, so I could just live off of that. And so I would go next door to one of my friends' house, you know, and I would be like, hey, you know, I would play with him and stuff like that. His mom would be like, hey, let's clean your room and stuff like that. I'd be like, let's clean it, you know, because that would be, you know, that would help me, because, and then she saw me helping him, and she'd be like, hey, you know, do you want to stay for dinner? I'm like, yeah, you know, so you had that kind of, you know, you needed that support no matter what, because I was by myself, basically.
And I think that's really important. So when if you listen to my podcast on trauma, and empathy and a lot of these things, you know, you're going to see that they have a kind of an underlying theme to all of them. And as a lot of people know, in CWS, you know, I've encountered, and even before I worked for CWS, I encountered a lot of foster children, and a lot of what we used to call at-risk youth who may not be in the foster care system, but they're still going through the same type of issues, whether it's abuse, neglect, just, being on their own at a young age. And sometimes that can be due to, a multitude of things, mental health on the parent's part, just being overwhelmed. You could just have a single mom who has 3 or 4 kids and she's just working 3 jobs and she just can't be there. So a lot of these kids is what in social work they started calling resiliency kids. These kids who are able to find a way to get that support, to get their basic needs met, even though they didn't have a lot of adult involvement, and definitely being children, they didn't have a lot of instruction. So it sounds like you were able to kind of get your basic needs met, because you're one of the most well-adjusted people I know. Yeah. But considering your background, you're like, wow, I know people who had, 2-parent households who actually had a lot of money. And like I said, I have friends who are, who are from Orange County and come from, I would even say, affluent families, and they're on opioids right now, and they're struggling with that. And they had all these, what we consider resources. Yet you found a way to make things work for yourself in your life and get your needs met with little to no help,
Well, I did have the help, and not the help that you would say like physical or something really attainable. It was more about me becoming like somebody that pleases people, because I needed that to be secure for myself. Like I needed, say I would go to your house and you would be there and you would be like, hey, you want a glass of water? I'm like, yeah. And I would grab the glass of water and I'll go wash it and stuff like that, because that meant for me that you would invite me over again. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I'm saying? So like for me, it was like, oh, let me go do this because I know that the outcome was going to be better than me saying no, or I don't want to do this because of this. It was more like, what can I attain or what could I learn from that situation? And so for me to really understand that, I mean, it took me a couple of issues for me to realize that I needed to do stuff for other people first before they could do for me.
And when you figured that out, about how old were you?
I would say I had to be about 9, 8 years old.
And the reason I asked that, because I know a lot of other kids, and even when I was a child and growing up in Atlanta, there's a lot of kids who were in similar situations, but they took a more feral approach, which kind of led to crime, right? So their attitude was, and again, I wasn't in their situation, but I can understand kind of the reasoning behind it, is that, yeah, I'm going to manipulate people, or I'm going to take certain things. So if I know that there's an old lady on the corner who, leaves her purse out, every day, I'm going to take a few bucks from that, or I'm going to steal this TV because I know this, or and that's how they survived. Why didn't you go down that path, which seems a little more upfront and obvious, and chose to go to a more, I guess, holistic path as far as getting other people to kind of help you in your life instead of taking advantage of them?
I think one of the major influence was my mother. I would get beat a lot. And so I did not want to displease, because the more time I spent with them, I think the more I got beat. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to be like, you know what, let me go somewhere else. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I was trying to figure out a way where I spent less time. And even though I was by myself, I was able to understand that if I got people to do stuff and not the opposite, if I would to steal something or do something, I would get the attention from that I didn't want. Okay.
So you understood at a young age that negative actions brought negative attention.
Yes, of course, yeah, definitely. And I think that was the main thing. And I think another part of my life that I'm so grateful for is that I always had God in my heart, no matter what. My parents are Jehovah's Witness. I'm not Jehovah's Witness no more. At an early age, I broke off of it because it was not something good for me. It was not, I have respect.
Mm-hmm. And was that because your parents happened to be
Yes.
Jehovah's Witnesses, or was it the religion itself?
I think it was the religion itself, and everything that comes with it. You know, it's it's a very demanding. Although it's a very demanding religion. You know, I didn't want to be part of it. Although, like I told you before, for me to avoid me being punished or hurt, I would have to do certain things where I would get the positive attention from other people as well, in the religion. So like if I would to, go and be like, hey, I would be able to do it, be able to speak in front of public and say, hey, this is what God wants. This is what this, and I would learn all this stuff, because that's what my parents wanted me to do. And so like for me to avoid punishment and other stuff, I actually did those things and I learned also as well. But, having that the God in me, and showing me the way, all these little things that I try to avoid, but implanting that little seed in me to understand that I needed to do good and to have faith in that my life was going to come out no matter what on top.
So fast forwarding a little bit, how did you end up meeting the woman who would become your wife? So
their neighbors were one of my friends, and obviously they knew them, and so we. Wow, this is a very personal thing, but basically we were coming down from the store, and I was kind of faded, and so I remember.
How old were you now?
I think I was like 20.
20? Okay.
Yeah, and Vianney was like 17.
Okay.
So, and I remember turning the corner, and just to the corner of my eye, I saw this gorgeous woman, and I was like, oh my God, who is that? So, I got off the car. I wasn't driving. It was a neighbor, my friend. And I was like, what? Wait, let me see. So I go out there, and my friend is like, no, come over here. He's pulling me away.
Why was he pulling you away?
Because he was interested in her.
Oh,
so that's one of the reasons why, right? So I went up there, and I actually, I introduced myself, and but man, she was. I fell in love with her the first moment I saw her.
Wow.
Yes.
So, well, is your friend? Are you still in contact with him, or?
Well, we don't talk.
Yeah.
But we Facebook and stuff like that.
Is he still mad at you?
I'm pretty sure.
So you were faded. So you were kind of like with your background and everything. Even though you had all these tools, you were still kind of like running the streets a little bit, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I know Vianney, and she seemed to me like. Again, like the reason I became friends with her because even though when I met her, I had a college degree and I would on paper, I guess I would be considered a responsible adult. Like internally, I wasn't a responsible adult. And so she was like really responsible. She was this, she knew what she wanted. She had goals. She had all these things. And so to me, it was like, cause CWS is chaos. And she would always be kind of like calm, and even though she had her issues with certain things we did, she was kind of like an upright citizen, even though she's a lot younger than me. And I was just like, wow, how can this young woman, kind of have it together more than I do? Like I need to learn how to figure this out because a lot of people don't know. In 2001, when I first got hired by Child Welfare Services, I worked there for 7 months and I quit. I was like, this is too much,
yeah.
And then I was like, and it wasn't just that. I thought I was going to be this mixed martial arts writer. I had a lot of gigs with these magazines, and then you realize that being a writer in the early 2000s, the magazine industry was about dying. It was pretty much now it's pretty much dead, but
yes.
Then it was dying. And so if I wanted to pay my rent, I had to have a real job. So I ended up going back in 2002. I was rehired, and fortunately, they had spots and all that. And then eventually, I think I came to VNA's office in 2005, and it was still crazy, but I just kind of had these coping skills how to deal with it, you know. And eventually, if you keep doing something for a while, you get good at it, right? So I just finally stuck it out and got good at it. But even then, when I met her, she was just kind of like this person who was just seemed in my mind had things figured out, and I was just like, wow. So all these other people who seem to just be, you know, drinking after work and because it was so much stress or so much what we call secondary trauma because of the things you see and stuff in child welfare weren't handling it in a healthy way, and she seemed to be fine. And I was just like, oh, well, like, how do you make it work, you know? And then I found out, you know, after I met you, you know, fast forwarding, I was like, wow. And I don't mean this to be an insult, but what I'm trying to figure out is like, how did you at that point in your life get a girl like that who seemed to have everything together, you know, intact family. A lot of people don't know this about her family, like her mother, who I consider like a saint. You know, you know, they had 3 kids and then adopted 3 kids on top of that, you know, and so you know, no family's perfect, but to me, that was like, wow, I put them on this pedestal, and like. So how did you get in there? You know, because me and you, I mean, kind of had this street mentality. Like, how did that happen?
So one of the main things that I think for me, remember how I told you being a pleaser or, you know, adapting to things? So when I met her and I actually got to talk to her and I met her family, I just didn't fall in love with her. I fell in love with the whole situation. You understand? So I saw this family that was united, and I said, wow, my whole life I've been looking for this.
Yes.
So I was like, oh my God, this is where I need to be, right? So obviously it didn't start like, oh, there you go, this is it right here. No. I mean, it took 7 to 8 months before she even became my girlfriend.
Oh.
So it was not like, oh, there you go. No, it was not like that.
So when you first talked to her, did you even manage to get her phone number, or did she like ignore you? Or
oh no, I have a good story for that one.
Okay, let's hear it.
So when I stopped, you know, when we stopped talking, I went inside to the next door neighbors, and her brother Arturo was there, and I said, "Oh, that's your sister?" Yeah, and I was like, "Well, give her my phone number." And Arturo's like, no, you know, I don't want this. You know, like, you know, right away he shined me off.
Being a good brother.
So I said, I'll tell you what.
And by the way, we're in Arturo's house right now.
Yes, we are.
Just so everybody knows.
Thank you very much for Arturo, right? Well, anyways, we. So I tell him, I said, remember back in the day, McDonald's had those 29-cent cheeseburgers.
Oh yeah.
So I told him, I'll give you $20 so we could go buy cheeseburgers. And you just give her my number. You don't have to do nothing. And he said, yeah. So we always make fun of him because of that. You know? So that was the start. That was the initial of it, you know?
Oh, that's hilarious.
So that next time you see Arturo, you got to let him know.
Yeah.
Like, hey, well, cheeseburgers, huh?
Yeah, cheeseburgers. Well, fortunately, it worked out, you know.
Yes.
And one of the things is, and I think it's important for you to have kind of a forum in speaking about this, is because I want people to understand that there's hustling and then there's hustling, right?
Yes.
And you can be a hustler in life, and a lot of times, especially me, you know, I grew up in Atlanta. Until I moved out of Atlanta when I was 15. But everybody wanted to be a hustler, but it had this negative thing. Even though it had a positive thing with the boys, you know, it was always about, you know, either, you know, it had some criminality to it, or it's about manipulating people. You know, people looked up to pimps, people who could just, you know, move money in weird ways. You know, I got out right before the crack epidemic hit, but I'm sure, you know, that became part of it too. You know, you heard it in our music at the time, especially in the 90s. So there's hustling, and then there's hustling in a way. I don't want to say it's a positive way, but it's more, has a more positive impact on yourself and society. So you were still using the resources available because you didn't have nothing. You weren't born with anything, and yet you still found ways to climb ladders.
That is correct.
And I think that's the kind of what I'm trying to get at with these initial questions, because to me, that's amazing. Like, you figured that out at a young age. and you figured out when you were 9, how to eat, and through support systems, and then eventually you met your future wife through the same way, and. They usually say the way to a man's heart's through his stomach. You got your wife through a man's stomach, your brother.
Yes.
So after that, after the 8 months, she finally agreed to be your girlfriend. How long between that and marriage?
So after we met in 97. Mm-hmm. So we got married in 2006.
Ah.
So, I mean, it wasn't like...
Yeah.
It wasn't like,
oh,
yeah. It wasn't like, oh, this is perfect and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
No, because remember, the stuff that I learned was not what she learned.
Right.
So in order for us, yes, in order for us, like her goal, I mean, like you said, she was motivated. She went to college. She had everything going on. She knew exactly what she wanted.
Right.
Like before we got married, she told me, this is what I need. Bop, 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 bop. And I was like, wow. Okay. So my goal was let's try to do the most that I can. And I say the most that I can because I knew that at her level, I was not there yet. Mm-hmm. Do you understand what I'm saying? So
right.
I was trying to compensate so much. Mm. And so at the time, for me, it was, you do get a little... how do you say, comfortable? Because you're like, she's here. Mm-hmm. She's not going to leave.
Yeah, where's she going?
But no, after that happened, I think it was like 2.5 years, we actually broke up.
Oh.
We broke up because of my immaturity, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I was not responsible enough. Because my way of thinking was, I need to make money today to waste it today because I don't know if tomorrow what's going to come tomorrow.
Right.
So I knew that today was good for today and not the future.
Which is the downside of hustling, right?
Yes.
Because you don't really hustle. Well, you can, but people who typically learn to hustle at a young age, they're hustling for what they're going to eat that night. They're not really hustling for what they're going to eat 2 months from now or 2 years from now or 10 years from now. They're thinking about, I need to get through the day. And usually, especially like you, coming to this idea at 9 years old, and as we know, through behavioral science, that the younger you are, the shorter distance in the future you can see. So, if you started your life plan, your hustling, or whatever you want to call it, at the age of 9, for you to be able to see at the age of 9, for you to be able to see age 12 would be very difficult. And I think that's how a lot of people kind of come up, people who are on the streets and people who are in tough situations, like people who live in domestic violence relationships. They're not thinking about if your parents are engaged in domestic violence, you're thinking about how can I get them, not to fight tonight. If you live in a household that has an addict, you're thinking about, okay, how can they not use tonight? Or how can I, if there's any abuse or neglect coming from it, or maybe there's a lack of food coming from that particular situation. How do we eat tonight? How does my little brother eat tonight? So what I want to get out to a lot of people who are listening to this is that that empathy, when we meet certain people, they all come from different backgrounds, and their perspectives are going to be a little bit different. And that's kind of what I think you're telling me about between you and Vianney, who had this tight family. She grew up, with this huge support system. You grew up on the opposite ends of that spectrum. And yet, there's a happy ending, but at the same time, this story of how you guys came together, I think is very fascinating because it's kind of a story that you can apply to many situations and many social interactions and many people throughout the country.
Well, I think that as life has taught me, usually you always look at the outcome that you want,
right?
And so when you're so clear, like clarity is one of the main things that I just learned not too long ago. And I'm saying not too long ago because although I have a great family, And and I'm saying family as my wife, the people that are around me, they're very great. They're supportive. They help me out. They taught me how to live for real, not to live in the moments, but to live for real, and that love that they give without, expecting nothing back from you. Because remember, I grew up differently. I grew up as you're expected to do something, and when I do something for you, I'm going to receive something back. And so that was one of the things that I struggled a lot for. And but learning these steps, learning to have that clarity of my outcome, what I want from life, and what's my purpose in life, I think that's what sets me apart from other people that went the opposite way.
Right. And you probably still know these people and their stories, and
yes.
For good or ill, there's probably some life lessons, unfortunately, you've been learned in that direction as well.
Yes, I have a couple of friends that one of them passed away, and that we grew up in the same neighborhood, and the other one's doing great. Mm-hmm. And their brothers are all they're gang related, went into the whole cartel thing, and
wow,
went the opposite way. And I remember their parents telling them in front of me, stay away from him because he's a bad influence.
Stay away from you?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he was like, he's a bad influence. And then later on in the future, 6-7 years later, I bumped into him, and he's like, wow, the favor I did for you. Because he would tell his kids to stay away from me, and they're the ones that went to a different
the father.
office. Yeah.
Wow.
And he's like, I wish I would have, I didn't know. But, when he saw me, he was like, wow, like you did good for yourself. Mm. And he told me, he told me, he's like, I did you a big favor. And I said, I'm pretty sure you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's one thing, don't give up on kids. Kids are very malleable. If they're under 18, even if they're over 18, they learn quick. They bounce back quick. Believe it or not, they learn from mistakes easier than adults, because adults are more set in their ways. So even if you have a kid who might mess up, 20, 30, even 100 times, it's easier for him to bounce back than an adult who messed up twice.
Yes. Yeah.
So never give up on a child, and you never seem to give up on yourself. So you broke up, you and your girlfriend broke up, and then what changed?
So I went to Lake Tahoe.
Okay.
I met some wonderful people. Mm-hmm. When I met them, they were all rich because they traveled with the seasons, they call it, right? Mm-hmm. The winter they went to Lake Tahoe, the summers they went to Oregon. Just that was their thing, right? And so I was like, wow. And so I would meet their parents, and just the way I am, every parent that I met was like, wow, Eazy, you're going to be something. You're going to do something, because none of their friends come and they clean our pool, or they cook for us. That like you're a step ahead of everybody. And I was like, wow, like, they believe so much in me because of the way I was. And I just realized, you know what, dude? I need to go back, because even if I have money or I don't have money, these kids all have the same problem that I did. Their parents, their parents said, here you go, here's your money. Go out there and don't worry about me. I'm going to be doing what I want to do. So they were not in part of their lives as well.
So even though, and I used to tell people this, because we used to have a lot of neglect cases in CWS. It's probably the biggest thing. A lot of people think it's, kids getting beat or sexual stuff, but it's typically neglect. And I think I said this before on one of my podcasts, but when I lived in Atlanta, I lived in Grant Park. And back then, now it's like gentrified. It's probably like $1 million homes or whatever. But back when I lived there, it wasn't. A lot of people were poor. My mom was considered working class, but there was like housing projects in certain parts of the area. And we got our house broken into like 3 times, and we had the burglar bars, the steel bars on the windows and stuff. So it wasn't a really good neighborhood. Fortunately, again, it was before the crack epidemic hit, so it got worse before it got better. But I got to tell you, some of the best families I knew were in that neighborhood. And then I would go out in the summers, and my cousins and stuff who lived in Mission Viejo, in Orange County, and then they had money. They'd go on ski trips. They do all this stuff, and I would just see them. Just like a lot of them, just hanging out, just doing nothing. We would go to some people. My cousin and I would go to some person's house, and they would just be no parents around. Parents are on vacation. The parents are in the Bahamas. The parents are doing this, and it was still neglect. Just because the kid had a credit card doesn't mean it wasn't neglect, because they were getting into trouble. There was kids that were hooking up at like 13 years old, 14 years. I mean, doing all kinds of stuff that growing up fast, I should say, and not really having any direction or parental supervision. And it was just as destructive as if it was in a trailer park, in the ghetto, or whatever you want to call it. So those support systems are real, and it doesn't care about how much money your family has. It doesn't care about your net income, what your mom or dad does for a living. It's like you said, it's the same problems.
Yes. And so that was my moment of clarity when I realized that we were the same people, no matter what, if I had money or not. So at that moment, I realized that instead of becoming a victim of the things that happened to me, I had to take action of what my future could be.
Right.
So I said, hey, this is it. I'm done. At the time, I was working in Oakland when this happened. I was a store manager for Starbucks. Mm-hmm. Somebody put me in that situation because of the person that I was. It wasn't that I was, oh, there you go. This is, you deserve it now. It was like, hey, who could I trust? And this person said she went on a peace, what is it called? Those, where they go out for 3 or 4 months.
Oh, Peace Corps?
Peace Corps, yeah.
Right.
And so she said, oh, we have a problem with the store because they're stealing. And this is in Oakland, Emeryville. I remember the store. And I remember going in there, and they told me, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to train you as a manager, and we're going to go ahead and train you, and you're going to go in there and saying that you're from another place. And so at that moment when I realized, wow, I could actually become somebody. I don't have to, settle with because I don't have an education, because I don't have this, I don't have that. Doesn't mean that I can't become bigger than what I am.
Right.
Whatever title you give me, that doesn't define who I am. Mm-hmm. So I started realizing right there and then, I need to move forward. Can't go backwards. So I called. I remember it was Vianney's birthday, and I don't know how I did it. I grabbed money that I could, and I grabbed the plane, and I came, and I said, hey.
How old were you now?
Oh, wow. So it was, had to be like 24. Mm-hmm. Or 23, something like that. I mean, I don't really recall exactly the age, mm-hmm. but at that moment, I remember the moment where I saw this picture, and it was like an actual picture saying, you need to move on. Like this, we're the same people. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters but you. You need to go forward. And I remember that the one thing that when I met Vianney, I knew she was going to be the one. And when I left, because of my own, so
that wasn't just infatuation. Yeah. Like it was, because a lot of people say that.
Yes.
Oh, this person, this guy, this girl's going to be the one, and it's just that initial feeling, that chemical feeling that you get. But you held on to that. I mean, this was real for you.
Well, the thing is that the way she made me feel as a person, nobody has ever shown me that. The person that I am. It was funny because I always tell her, "Oh, I'm a diamond in the rough," right? Because she has to polish me. She had to train.
You were Aladdin.
And it was so funny because I tell my wife all the time.
This is the Aladdin San Diego barrio version.
So I tell my wife all the time, I'm like, well, without you, I don't know where I would be, because she literally shined me. She polished every stuff that I had that was wrong. She polished. And so, like I said, I did struggle a lot. And when I came back, I said, this is what I need to do. And remember, I told you I was not responsible. So I owed all these bills. And it took me, I think it was like a year and a half, and I paid all this money down because I came back with a purpose. And so knowing that purpose, I knew exactly what I had to do. So I started breaking everything down. Instead of me saying like, I owe $20,000, I said, I owe this person this, I owe this person that, I owe this person this. And I started paying, little by little.
Right.
And so before I knew it, I was like, all right, I'm back where I was supposed to be in the beginning.
Right.
And it's so funny because I remember telling my wife the first day I got insurance. Oh, I feel so good. And I'm like, that's what you're supposed to have. My wife just, she looked at me, she's like, that's what normal people do, you know? You're supposed to. And I was so proud because I had insurance, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Well, you're coming from a different space, you know, that's what happened. So eventually you know, she took you back.
Yes. Oh yeah. I was not getting an answer. I didn't accept the no. You know, and remember I told you, clarity is one of the main things that we have, that if you have that, no matter what, it's trial and error, you know? And I know, you know, sometimes, like you said, you could be, you could say, oh yeah, she's the love of my life, and she's not. But I felt it completely. I felt it 100%.
Well, I think there's a dog in the background. Hold on a second. So how did the marriage take place?
So that was when we got married. I got a job. We had a house first, and so I had to, like, once again, I had to work. I think both of us had like 3 jobs at the time, and so we had to work for this house. And so when I took off, I got a Class A license, and I took off over the road. And it was the most difficult time because there was no time spent with my wife or my girlfriend at the time.
Right.
So when I came back, I said, you know what, dude? No, we got to do something else, and we got to really, you know, see if I can get a job here, you know. And so she got her bachelor's, and she started working as well. So we were going in and out, and finally she said, "That's it. We're just getting married." And she picked the date. I think it was like 3 months before that we decided to do it. And as soon as that happened, you know, it was a blessing. First blessing, like, it was a blessing because as soon as we did that, I got a job here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like, boom. I came back, and I got hired this company called Harvest Meats as a truck driver. I didn't get paid that much. But the following week, all these other places that I applied for, 7-Up, Coke, Pepsi, Lenore, all these places that were hiring, 7-Up gives me a call and says, "Hey, you know, you're still looking for a job?" I'm like, "Yeah." So that's where I started, you know, doing that. And so I knew, like I said, we had a purpose, and we kept it, and we started working on our marriage. And you know, one of the things that, you know, that I've, you know, because it was not like, oh, there we go, you know, we're perfect.
Right.
No, I mean, we had to learn to live with each other first of all, and then my ways and her ways obviously are not the same. So I had to learn how to adapt. But one of the things that kept us together was always God, going to church, you know, understanding that that's our priority in our lives.
So you had that in common, right? And then I think that's important because if you listen to some of my other podcasts, I always recommend people in their 20s don't get married and a lot of that's a personal bias, you know. So yeah, I mean, and now today, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, but one of the reasons I wanted you on this podcast is because you have figured out, and you started at an early age, and you could see the theme throughout your story. You figured out goal setting and how to obtain those goals. and to figure that out like on your own. Like you didn't. I mean, now you're listening to different sources, resources, different podcasts, different books, reading different books and material. But you started at age 9 figuring this out of how to get what you need. And I think there's people, regardless of where they are in life. I mean, there's people who are CEOs who still kind of haven't figured it out. They've figured out how to get to a particular title, and yet they're still not fulfilled. They're still not happy, or they don't know what they're going to do next. So, for a truck driver, a kid who was born, in not the best of circumstances and didn't grow up in the best of circumstances to be able to figure this out, I think that's very valuable because it's obviously there's certain things in life that you can't buy, and you can't buy that type of knowledge. And there's people, and I want everyone else to know when we talk about building support systems, there are people around you that have these instincts, they have different strengths. Sometimes it's cool to know that one guy who's just a good street fighter. He's going to be able to escort you to your car, Yeah. And then there's that person, who's just good at math, and then you they can help you in that area. And there's some people who just know. But I think sometimes we forget about the people who have this amazing, what we call EQ, this emotional intelligence that enables them to figure things out. Just like there's these geniuses who can start in their garage and then come up with Google. There are these people who start out, in their garage or on the streets or whatever, who can come up with, probably what we would consider the closest thing to a perfect family. And obviously there's no such thing as a perfect family, but when you consider where they came from, it's like light years, a light years in distance from where they started. And these people can be just as important resources in your life as the person who knows how to handle money, or as the person who knows how to fight, or as the person who's, good at fitness and health, and if you get a good support system around you, which I think I've figured out how to do somewhat, your life becomes a lot easier in a lot of different ways. So you guys got married. Now you have 2 beautiful kids, when, as far as goal setting now, how old are you now?
I'm 41.
41.
Yes.
41. And yet you're still goal setting and you're still coming up with new challenges. Tell me about that.
So definitely, I didn't know back then that goal setting was so important. I didn't give it a label. Right. I just knew that my outcome was this, and I don't know how or the activities that I was going to do to get there. So recently, I think 2 years ago, when I realized, like, wow, this is actually goal setting. This is what I've been doing my whole life, and one of the other things that I learned, that for me, like saying that I'm a pleaser, it means adding value to other people. Right. When you add that value, like me washing a dish or helping my friend clean, you add that value to them, those people are going to see you as somebody that is worthy. And so that's why they provide you with things that, they give you. I think I've heard one of the guys that I listen to, he's a motivational speaker. And, one of the things he said, he's like, you want to become rich for what? For significance? Mm-hmm. You want to have this car because people, they're going to look at you and be like, wow. And so I was like, wow, that is crazy, because that's how I felt. When I help people, I felt significant. Mm-hmm. And yet I didn't have that car or I didn't have that money, but I felt significant at the time, and it felt really good because, creating that was awesome. Having an impact on people is another thing that I for me, that's one of my goals in life, to create that value for other people so they could learn or they could understand what they're doing themselves. Because sometimes we're just floating. Yeah. And we're not understanding that what we're supposed to do. We work to get our cash so we could go and have fun. But yeah, we don't realize the things that we could do with that.
And I think that's a very important concept, because I think a lot of human beings, what we struggle with is power, right? We seek power. And why do we seek power? It's because we want to have control over our lives. If there's certain areas of our life, if your parents got divorced at a young age, maybe you didn't feel you had control over that, and you didn't have control over the way your family situation has turned out, or even sometimes if you have to move. As a kid, you don't have control. People who have been abused and neglected. Sometimes you will see, and even in the more tragic, situations. But you'll see a lot of people who have been especially females who've been sexually abused. You will see them gain a lot of weight in high school, or they'll go the opposite direction and become very promiscuous and stuff. And a lot of people say, well, why is that? And what studies have shown is because when they were being abused, they didn't have control over their bodies. And now these are this certain ways of saying, it might not be the most positive ways, but they're saying, well, this is control. So I think all human beings struggle with control and power. And yet one of the most powerful things in the world, and probably the most powerful thing, is to be able to help another human being. Because a lot of people, and guys, we talk about women who are abused. What happens to a lot of guys who've been abused in those same type of situations? They become tough guys. They want to beat other people up. They want to show how tough they're at. First it starts as conduct disorder, when they're in elementary school, turns into more antisocial type disorder as they become adults. They're the guys at the club. And I used to remember these guys. They're good street fighters, great street fighters, and they were cool to have around if they're one of your crew. But then you start realizing, you show up at a party with this guy and people start leaving. Yeah. It's like, that's a bad feeling, man. You don't want to be that guy or a part of that group. And it's like, is that real power? If people will never give you a chance and basically avoid you, I knew I had we call them customers now, but we call clients when I was a social worker in CWS, and there were some who would always try to intimidate their social worker, And I understand the anger. Somebody just took your kids. Right? That you have a right to be angry. I would always validate that. But then I would sit down, and because they would put, because I was the big black guy, it's like, oh, why don't you go handle this customer, Brian? We don't want to talk to him. Okay. And we took kids away from gang members and bikers and, people who are in the cartels and stuff like that. So that these are people, if they could, they were smart enough to make a verbal threat, but these are people who know how to give you a look, and yeah. And if they said things, they know how to say things a certain way, and you get the message, And I would just sit them down, and I didn't try to use my size or my ability to fight to get a message across to them. What I would tell them was, the last thing you want, if you truly want your kids back, the last thing you want is for somebody in the system, whether it's a social worker or a police officer or a probation officer, to be afraid of you, because what that means is they're going to avoid you. And the avoidance is what humans have to deal with. And that's probably what you've grown up with, neglect, And what's going to happen if they avoid you? Well, they're going to see you as much as we're mandated to see you. We're going to tell you what you want to hear. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, we're not going to give you the bad news. And then we know we're only going to have to see you one last time, and that's in court. And the judge is going to say, your parental rights are terminated. And then we don't have to see you again. Yeah. And you lost your kids. So you don't want people to be afraid of you. But yet, that's the way most people view power. Instead, I would have moms who were neglected, even fathers. I say, you know what? Nobody says you can't volunteer at your kid's school. If you don't have a criminal record, why not? Go do that. You want more time with your kid? Volunteer at their school. You want... go see what life is like outside. And when you actually see that you actually have something to give. And once they did that, it was better than anything else I had on the case plan, because we'd have all this stuff, yes, they would have to do their AA, groups. Yes, they would have to do substance abuse programs, sometimes domestic violence programs. But when they volunteered, and that was something extra that I would put on top of it, which they already had a full week of stuff to do. But when they would volunteer and help somebody else, they realized that they had power. They realized that they had something to give. That's what gives you the self-esteem in order to come back and actually get through the stuff that the system's putting on you. And we're all in some form of system, people. It's whether might not be an official system, it might not be the criminal justice system or the child welfare system, but we're all a slave to some type of system, whether it's your job, whether it's, just the government, it's taxes, you got to pay your taxes. And getting through that and having a sense of power, you get that through how you can help your community and others. Sometimes even strangers, oftentimes even strangers. And I think that point that you made is just so important, and that's why I'm talking so much about it, because I don't think people see it like that. They see power as, well, if I just had an extra $20,000 a year, that's the power I need to do this. Or if I could, if my boss was just a little bit more intimidated of me, and maybe they wouldn't tell me to do this, and they wouldn't make me work on the weekends or whatever. None of that's going to really fulfill you, and none of that's really going to uplift your self-esteem. What would you say?
Yes. I actually, I had mentioned to you before that now as 2 years from now, 2 years earlier, I did not have that fulfillment. I didn't. I had an empty. That person. I bought motorcycles, a brand new car, jet ski, all kinds of things to fill these empty hole that I had. Although I had such a wonderful woman, and I have a wonderful woman that supported me, and and she would let me do these things, although she didn't approve of them, but I think she had that empathy to say, you know what, he went through a hard time, he's trying to cope with it, he's done better than I seen, so I think that letting me do this thing was. I think it worked out, because finally I got to one point where I said, why am I doing all this stuff? I'm creating more debt in our family budget or, in our income than what I'm getting out of it.
Right.
Being happy. So when I learned, and this is step by step. It's not like, oh, there you go. This is learning things step by step all the time, And my wife being there to support me and saying, yes, let's do this. And let's do this. Having that support from her was the best thing that could ever happen to me.
Right.
And so when I learned that she is not responsible for my own happiness, that I am responsible. When I realized that, man, you should see the different person that I am now. I mean, yeah, I always been a cheerful guy. I made people laugh. Yeah, but at the same time, I didn't know. Remember when I told you, I said I saw that vision. Instead of me becoming a victim, I actually said, you know what? Let me move forward from this. So I realized as soon as I learned that I needed to be happy because of me, not because somebody else is making me happy. That's when everything came together. And now, the communication that I have with myself that I didn't have, I learned. And so now that the communication that I have with me, I have a better communication with my kids. I have a better communication with my wife. I enjoy life a lot better than what I had before. All the things that I have, which are material things, I enjoy them more. And they're not as expensive as they were before. So
what are some of your, as far as goal setting now, what are some of your principles?
So as in goal setting, I have a method. It's called SMART.
I've heard of the SMART. Yeah.
SMART.
So what is that to people?
So basically, it's something something that you write down, and then you break it down to the things that you could have. One of the things, the S, stands for being specific. Have a specific goal. Like I need to save. I have a goal right now. It's setting. We're going to go to Puebla, Mexico, in November. So I broke it down, and and me and my wife, we look at these, my kids as well, they look at them, and we put them down, and we say, we need to raise $5,000, and we need, how do I get this? It's $166 a week. And I break it down where I need to work an hour extra every day or 4 hours on the weekend to make that money, and then why do I want to do this? The reason behind it, have that purpose. And, I tell my kids, dude, to have fun with you guys, to enjoy, to make those memories count. and be in that time, and then the last one would be, obviously it's specific. I think I have them written down, but one of the
measurable, right?
Yeah, measurable, attainable, measurable. The other one is relatable, and then time bound. So I have 30 weeks to do it from last week till November when we're leaving. It's 30 weeks. And so I break it down, and you're like, oh, well, $166. Guess what? If I stop eating once a day at In-N-Out or McDonald's, that's $30-$40 right there that you saved a week. So you break it down, you start having these equations where you start breaking stuff down, and you start integrating all these little things. Even my kids, they integrate these things, and they're like, oh yeah, we don't want ice cream, we want this instead because we're going to save money to go here. And so once we go to places that are new to us, the best thing is like when you see your kids, their eyes light up, and you're like, like what? Like we did this? Yeah, we did this. We got here.
Do they understand? Because when you used to spend money just to feel good, I'm sure you spend a lot of that on the family and the kids too. Do they understand now the sacrifices of not having something and then that deferred gratification of getting something later?
That yes, and that's, I think that was one of the most important thing. And to answer you, I bought things for myself, not for my family.
Oh,
that was my problem.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
and I think a lot of people do that.
And that for me it was like, oh no, I want to be happy.
Yeah, and you're thinking, well, I earn the money, why can't I just buy it?
That is correct. Right. And so you think about it, and you really you put in that situation, and you don't understand until later.
Right.
As my wife stopped working, like 5 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
So
remember, I was upset because she used to handle a lot of stuff for me at work. She's like, I'm not coming back.
So, we were put in a situation where she had to stop working because I would, she and me had an agreement. There's 3 things in my life that before we got married that I put in place with my wife. And one is that my kids were never going to get taken care of from nobody else. Like, my in-laws and her are about.
That's it.
And my brother-in-law, Arturo, I really trust them. I trust them. Obviously, I trust them enough that he married my niece.
Yeah.
So
keep it in the family.
There you go. So, and then the other thing was that, they were going to get options. My kids were going to get options because I never got options. Going to a family restaurant and me ordering for my kids, even though they don't want it, that really, it bugs me. And so I said, you know what? When they know what they want, and if they don't need it, it's okay. But they're going to get the option. They're not going to get that restraint that, like us as growing up as kids, we didn't get. Like, dude, you got this, and it was left over. You got it, and you got to deal with it.
Right.
And that's it. And I don't want that for my kids. So that was my thing that me and Vienna, we talked about, and I let her know this is what I want. And the other thing is that no matter what, they're going to go to school. They're going to go to college or some kind of career, a short-term career. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. Like I tell my kids now, if you start learning how to read and write, everything is possible for you. I was like, because those are two more things that are very important. How to articulate when you read something. Yeah. How to comprehend that and put it in practice. Because I didn't have that growing up, and I didn't have that support where my dad were, let me show you how this is done. No, I didn't. I failed a lot of things. I dropped out of school. I mean, I had to go back and get my high school diploma at age 25. Yeah, because that was one of the requirements before I got married from my wife. He's like, you need to at least get a high school.
Sounds like you both were goal setters.
Yeah. So that's exactly what I did. And so like I went back at 25, and said, yeah, there you go. I got my high school diploma. Here you go. But and I tell my kids this, and I want them to learn from everything that I've done. not live it, but learn.
Mm-hmm.
And if I could teach them how to teach me, like I tell them all the time, like, hey, teach me how to do this. Teach me. Because instead of me saying, you need to do this, if I told you, you need to do this, you need to go do your bed,
right.
you need to go do this,
mm-hmm.
it's you're like, no, like I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But if you want somebody to actually, how do you say, persuade,
mm-hmm.
You're selling something, you'd be like, can you teach me how to do this?
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, Dad. Oh my God, their eyes open up and like, oh, Dad doesn't know how to do this.
Right. And it goes back to that power coming from helping, right? If they believe that they're helping you, they feel powerful, and they're buying, and the same thing gets accomplished. The same. You just wanted the bed made, and at the same time, you figured out a way to not only get the bed made, but to give your kids self-esteem in doing so.
Yes.
So you got a 2-for-1.
Yes, and I think that's one of the most important things to have, the self-esteem. Like, I could say that I was confident, but at the same time I wasn't. But I acted the part.
Right.
Like I acted that I was really confident that, hey, you put me in a situation, believe me, I'll get out of it. Because I know that I can. But not because of the confidence, because of the methods that I had for me to do that.
Exactly. So we're probably going to wrap up right about now. I just want to make people to understand that we're not claiming we invented the SMART goals. Oh, that was invented, I think, in 1981. It was in Management Review. But a lot of people use it. These are things that you can stick to. You can Google them online. And I think the 3 things I'm taking away, I'll just call this Eazy Life. Easy life. One is power is in helping. There's a lot of power personal power that you can get out of helping people. You're responsible for your own happiness, and SMART goals. I mean, they're simple. Again, Google them online. They're not original concepts from us, but you can go out there and you can find them. What are they again?
There's being specific,
measurable.
Measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound.
There you go.
And those are the things that, these are resources that I took from online.
Yeah.
These are not.
These are things that when I was getting my MBA, they would talk about and I would ignore. And then I see you afterwards. You're telling me about them. I'm like, oh yeah. That's what I should be doing.
So that's one of the things that we have. We have so much knowledge in our tip of our hands. We don't even have to leave the house.
Yeah, and I think the big thing would be that if you don't have a support system, you can develop one, and there's resources around you that are in people. That can really help you more than taking a class. Like I can learn, again, I don't think I would be married. I think I told you before, I don't think I'd be married if I didn't see all the efforts that went into you and VNA being such a successful couple and having a successful family. If I didn't see that, I remember I used to come to your family parties, and I'd bring one girl this month, and then next month it would be another girl. You guys would be looking at me sideways.
Yep.
And, even your mother-in-law. A lot of people don't know you took your wife's last name.
Yes, I did.
You took see now how many macho men are willing to do that? How many people are that appreciative? As a child of adoption myself, I appreciate that. Because you know where you got your needs met, and you appreciate what their family invested in you, and that investment obviously paid off. Obviously because you're sitting here talking to me. No, I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, it is.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's the great thing to do. And you're showing that respect, and you understand. How much a support system means to a human being. And now you're willing to share that. I think we're going to have a lot of more podcasts together,
I hope
together.
So, yes.
I think you have a lot to offer the world. And I'm just happy that you allowed me to share this little piece of your life with the masses.
Yes. And thank you very much for having me. And remember, since day one, since I met you, you've always been an inspiration to me.
Oh, okay.
Always. I always looked up to you, and you're a wonderful person. You're somebody that's real, and I relate to you. I relate to you because everything that you talk, even on your podcast, everything is relatable. It's what's happening right now in our lives. So if you grab anything that you say and you put that in practice, just a little teeny thing, that's what makes the difference. You know, you learn from these people that are great, like you.
well, thank you for that. And thank you, Arturo, for letting us use your house. You know, a lot of you probably heard some noises in the background. That was Arturo's
Kuka.
dog.
Yeah.
Kuka, you know, we're a family show and dogs are part of our family. So don't hate. All right. This is Brian P. This has been Scaling the Well. And thank you very much.